Good afternoon to everyone in Jakarta in Indonesia, and good morning to everyone in Poland. Welcome to the Indonesia-Poland Youth-to-Youth Dialogue, Challenges to Democracies and Young Generation Perspectives. My name is Harza, and I will be your Master of Ceremony on today's event. First of all, we would like to welcome our honorable guest who is joining us here today, Dr. Katarzyna Manizewska, Vice Rector for International Relations of Collegium Civitas. We would also like to welcome our distinguished speakers and moderator today, students from Collegium Civitas, FPCI Chapter Universitas Pelita Harapan, FPCI Chapter London School of Public Relations, Jakarta, FPCI Chapter Universitas Airlangga, and FPCI Chapter Universitas Bina Nusantara. And also, welcome to our moderator today, Jenny Sari Winata, Program Coordinator of FPCI Indonesian Youth Democracy Forum. Also, welcome to all of the students who are joining us online through our YouTube channel. During today's event, we encourage all participants to share your moments with us by tagging us on at FPCindo at all social media platforms. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, unfortunately, Dr. Dino Patijalal, founder and chairman of Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia, is unable to join us live in today's discussion, as he is currently in the US for some engagements. And to open today's discussion, we will first hear a message from Dr. Dino.
Hello, this is Dino Jalal. I am sending this message from Washington, D.C. I want to thank my good friend, Dr. Katarzyna Maniseska from Collegium Civitas in Warsaw, Poland, and all the students. And I also want to welcome and say hello to all the Indonesian students who are taking part in this Indonesia-Poland Youth-to-Youth Dialogue on Democracy. I was actually in Warsaw on my way to Ukraine, but only for a few hours. So I apologize to Dr. Katarzyna that I didn't have time to contact her and visit the Collegium Civitas. We are here to discuss a very important topic, which is democracy. And I want to make the point that democracy has only three directions to go. One is to become stronger. Two is to become stagnant, and three is to experience decay, to deteriorate, right? And these three routes, these three directions are possible to be experienced by any democracies, including in our countries, if we don't guard our democracies well. The fact of the reality is democracies is not the perfect system, but in my view, it is the best system relative to all the other systems. And democracies does need a lot of work because democracies can get sick and can have a lot of problems if we don't tend to its needs. Democracies, for example, can produce bad leaders, which in fact would be bad for the people. Democracies are not immune to corruptions. Democracies do not necessarily automatically solve problems. And in democracies, people can be manipulated and can be led to make ill-informed decisions. In democracies, you can have mass authoritarianism. People who take the law on themselves and force their views on others. And what this means is that democracy's work is never finished. And it is important that for the youth to understand that they must own the democracy system that they live in. And they have to understand what democracy is and what democracy isn't, right? And this means they have to understand and be aware of the red flags when the red flags happen, so they can immediately fix it. The challenge that uh, uh, we need to face is how we can ensure that democracies do produce good, responsible, accountable leaders, right? Because sometimes in some or many political systems, the next generation of political leaders can be even worse than the previous one. Yeah. We need to make sure how democracies can solve problems and how democracies can connect with governance, because only when democracy can connect with governance that it can resolve problems that the nations face, and also how democracies can always be engaged with reforms, because again, reforms do die after a while and they need to be always resuscitated. So I really welcome the dialogue that the Indonesian and Polish youth are having today. You have to be mindful of the fact that in any democracy, the health of that democracy is dependent on the energy of the youth to maintain it. If the youth becomes more radical and less democratic, then obviously the quality of that democracy will decline, right? So the youth must always be at the forefront of efforts to protect and expand the quality of the democracy that they live in. The challenge for different nations are different. Indonesia's democratic challenge is different than Poland's democratic challenge. And this is why it's important for us to share experience and to enter into an exchange of views and thoughts on the challenges faced by our countries and how to overcome them. I thank you and I wish you a very good discussion.
Thank you, Dr. Dino, for your message. Now, I would like to welcome the Vice Rector for International Relations of Collegium Civitas, Dr. Katarzyna, I'm very sorry if I butcher your name, to deliver her opening remarks. Dr. Katarzyna, you may have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And let me please begin by saying how grateful we are for this opportunity and for that we can engage in cooperation with foreign policy community, Indonesia, one of the leading think tanks that, as Dr. Dino just said, puts a very strong emphasis on the young generation. And this is something that we have in common between foreign policy community Indonesia and Collegium Civitas, a university located in Warsaw. And I'm greeting you today from the Palace of Culture and Science in Warsaw. It's early in the morning here. We have at the Collegium Civitas students from about 70 countries of the world. And what we can see and observe here on a daily basis is how important this engagement of our student is. The engagement not only in learning, but perhaps for mostly in discussing and coming up with solutions to the current problems that the world is facing. And now for today's discussion, you will be able to hear some of our most brilliant students. And that actually not only from Poland, because we also have a representative of Turkey, our student Errol, who will also be able to share the perspective from a different country, coming from Turkey, but living already in Poland for a couple of years. So I think it may be really interesting. And I can only support what Dr. Dino has just said. I actually have it in my talking points as well. The young generation is absolutely fundamental and crucial in order to protect our democracies. To counter the radicalization processes, to counter polarization in the societies, which we observe not only here in Poland, not only in Indonesia, but also in many different countries of the world. Moreover, in today's globalized and interconnected world, we have to be aware that all sorts of threats, security threats, threats to democracy, they can multiply and radiate different regions of the world. If something happens in Indonesia, it can have consequences to Europe. If something happens here on European soil, it can radiate to Indonesia, to ASEAN countries. So the key word here is cooperation. And the more, I'm really glad that we can have this discussion today. And we have those young leaders gathered here who will be able to discuss the challenges, tell us also, the older generation, from their perspective, what they identify as the key challenges to democracies and how can we overcome the challenges. I'm sure we will. And I think the engagement of our students, of those young people, bears testimony to that. With them, I think sky is the limit and democracy will prevail. And so this as a small opening remarks from my part. Thank you once again to all the students, Indonesian and Collegium Civitas students, to our moderator, to our MC, and all the FPCI team that was involved in the organization of this event, which I hope will be just the first step. And we will be having such events and discussions on relevant topics also in the future. Thank you very much. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Dr. Katarzyna, for your message. Now, I would like to welcome our moderator, Jenny, to lead today's discussion. Without further ado, Jenny, you may have the floor.
Thank you, Herza. Good afternoon, everyone from Jakarta. Good morning to those joining from Poland. It is a pleasure to host our discussion today. We are glad to be joined by Indonesian students, Polish students. We have someone from Turkey, growing up in Poland, and then I believe some from other countries perhaps also joining from YouTube, so welcome. Today is going to be a very important and I would say a very timely topic. Indonesia and Poland, we have differences in our democracy, different challenges, but this is the point of having this session today, to learn from each other and to see things from each other's perspectives. And one thing for sure that we have in common is that we acknowledge the importance of having this discussion among the youth, and I think we all agree that the youth must care. So what we would like to see in today's discussion is really an open, candid discussion. Let it be a platform to speak freely, to connect really both countries, and as what Pak Dino and Miss Katarzyna have said as well in their remarks, that where democracy is heading really depends on the youth. The quality really depends on us. So as important as it is to listen from the experts and the practitioners, it is also very important to listen to what we have to say today, who will be speaking later. So that's why we have this session today. So I would like to set the scene by asking this to all of the discussants today. I know everyone have their own thing to say, to share, but the bottom line is to really hear your thoughts on where do you think our democracy is today? Is it getting stronger? Is it getting weaker? What's your thoughts about this? It's different cases for all countries all around the world, but particularly your country, and also explain what challenges that you found the most, it catch your attention the most in your country today. So I will start with Alista Kaylin from FPCI chapter Universitas Pelita Harapan.
All right, thank you so much for our moderator, Kak Jenny. So I would like to first start with one of the challenges of democracies is about making democracy in a digital age. FPCI Supaha chapter Kalista Kaylin would like to deliver and demonstrate the said research regarding making diplomacy in the digital age, as such hoax, disinformation, freedom of speech, and many more. The main aspects of thus mentioned improvements in the modern era in this democratic world is having these advancements such as social media, affecting most of our daily lives. Social media helps promote not only updates of one said to another, but oversharing democracy traits, both negative and positive, that goes to the merry way of redefining the true meaning of democracy in today's world. Democracy is one of the most important factors when it comes to the modern world. Modern democracy stands such problems: money politics, identity politics, political polarization, and many such more. What is really the true meaning of democracy in today's world? Today, democracy is representative, where citizens have the freedom such as elections on the behalf of many, a diverse way of thinking throughout knowledge and the concept of defining the meaning behind what people believe in. Creating a system for generations is just the key of showing strength and how we share information through important affairs from within and outside one's country. Criminalization is not a rare thing to occur within the world's grounds and ways of acknowledgement of a crime, but that does not apply to the concept of being one of the most sought out careers in many countries. That does not mean crime does not exist from within. Focusing more on acknowledgement as Indonesia continues to strive, but with the amount of crime-related rates connected to journalists from the country, leads to sharing the said journalist code from the country. And an Indonesian journalists always are in need of verifying informations, conducting balanced reporting, does not mix facts with biased opinions, and upholds the presumption of innocence principle. Research shares the ITE law in Indonesia, which thus said law that is responsible for controlling and maintaining the usage of technology information and electronic transactions. Surprisingly, one of the earlier cases that are known, 5 to 9 of them, were charged with articles from Indonesia's ITE law, which shows the importance and significance of the implicants and application of the ITE law. This heavily affects the freedom of these Indonesian journalists of their way to show expression through their work, but promoting the freedom of opinionated individuals and how they are shared through both promoting justice and rule of law stances, providing security in the citizens within the country to share their likes, dislikes, and concerns that should be able to be shared from all perspectives, and how we could provide combined both understanding and solution within a country. Since nowadays every day has been digitalized with creating mass media, many have migrated the world's electronics to the modern realm. The policymakers are the governments, which ratifies the ITE laws, which are brought together with supervisors in social media. Hoax is known to be the dangers in today's society. Fake news, fake information are known for ones or groups that want to show more information that doesn't have the basis of support statements. Sharing this information for the gain of one or a group that shows no basis with generation that is continuously growing, and systems that are currently promoting democracy for the gain of a country and individual. Indonesia often comes together with the violation of some chapters from within the ITE law and the country's law from the 5-year data to the year 2015 and 2020, which forever be a reminder of redefining the meaning of the freedom of democrats and share freely of facts and informations. Criminalization is known for famous leads of the law from Indonesia. 19 cases were followed and directly pointed to newswriting journalists. Refusing to write facts and having personal affairs interfere, causing big conflicts from within and outside of Indonesia. Excluding the freedom that is part of today's dialogue of sharing information that is through democratic speeches that is known well in the improvements of the stances that will be provided. All examples of these democratic choices can affect both positive and negative that argumentally shows in an individual point of view that could be shared together democratically within the majority. Part of understanding today's purpose as people continue to advance in the modern world tend to the freedom-led and awareness construction of these problems like criminalization that makes effects to the country and its citizens. As youth, we understand that social media or electronics are really important for many things, improving knowledge, building connections, as well as expressing ourselves and needs. But due to this, we are prone to not understand freely and truly and how mass media affects through constant movements and improving the world we live in. With the data shared before, from criminalization until the dangers of faking and fraud of informations, and how the law would be included and shared through. So as youth, we should share and help spread awareness of the dangers and advancements we have now in the modern era with cautious movements so that we don't overstep any boundaries or laws. At the same time, providing safe sharing spaces for democratic topics and democratic environments. That is all from UPH chapter, FPCI. Thank you.
Thank you, Calista. You addressed one of the most timely issue of democracy today. It's on technology and social media. It's very close to the youth heart, I believe. You mentioned it's positive and negative, and really you put emphasis on these hoax and misinformation. And I think this is all over the world. The issue is not only in Indonesia. And we also know that the EU has this sort of a reference that we can take a look at later or some other time where they have this EU Digital Service Act, if I'm not mistaken, the content moderation. And we'd love to know more about that later if somebody from Poland can bring it up and how that has applied in your country. Because in Indonesia, misinformation and content, sort of moderation, quote unquote, is being discussed really intensively as well. So yeah, now I'd like to go first to Jasmine Hannah, and then we go to Polish students. Jasmine?
All right, thank you, Ms. Jenny, for the moderated. So, hello everyone. So, FCCI Chapter LSPR would like to talk about inclusive political participation, specifically the bottom-up participatory and inclusive approach in policy making and development. Inclusive political participation and representation are fundamental to democracy as they embody the freedom of citizens to express their opinions and to mobilize to and influence the policy. However, promoting and ensuring inclusive political participation and representation are still challenged for today democracy. Expanding the space for civic engagement and developing ways to provide people with a more direct role in setting agendas and shaping the public decisions that affect them can be important factor for more inclusive and responsive governance. Participatory governance is a central tenet for this approach, which means that everyone affected by a particular decision should be able to take part in the decision-making process without any discrimination, obviously. And also participation serves in two critical purposes. First, it facilitates system learning, helping us to build a foundational understanding to resolve contentious issues. And the second one is it ensures that local expertise and knowledge are integrated into a decision making, enhancing the likelihood of successful policy implementation. Participatory in policy design through consultative or participatory methods, ultimately fostering accountability, transparency, and also active citizenship. In Indonesia, with its diverse cultural, religious, and linguistic backgrounds, recognize the importance of the bottom-up political participation. It's emphasized in the concept of musyawarah or deliberative discussion is deeply integrated in Indonesian culture. This is exemplified through the village law enacted in 2014, which is one of the example of the bottom-up approach. So this law empowers local communities to actively shape policies and also develop their project at the grassroots level. Village have been granted autonomy to manage their own development funds, ensuring that decisions are made by those who understand the local needs best. Also, this bottom-up approach ensures that communities are active participants in their own development and also making decisions that directly impact their lives. Also, in Indonesia, Furthermore, Indonesia has actively embraced participatory in governance through mechanisms such as National Development Planning System, atau, or we call it here Musrenbang, and it's allow citizens to provide input and participate in the planning and budgeting process at the local and national levels. This initiative encourage open dialogue between the government and also the people, and it has to fostering transparency and accountability. Also, the principle of inclusive political participation, featuring a bottom-up participatory and inclusive approach to policy making and development, are not covered by borders. They are universal value that form from the foundation of a strong democracy around the world. As we step into the challenge and opportunity of the 21st century, let us remember that the future of our democracy relies on the active participation of the next generations. I extend a heartfelt invitation to all the youth, to irrespective of their place of origin, to lead the charge in defending and also fortifying democracy globally. Our energy, ideas, and also unwavering dedication to inclusivity are invaluable. The protection and advancement of democracy are not just responsibility of a few, but it's a collective mission that needs of youth, fresh perspective and also patience. In the 21st century, the safeguarding of democracy is a shared task. So let's unite in our effort to shape a future where democratic value shines, where every voice finds expressions, and where the youth stand at the vanguard of preserving this precious heritage for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. Exactly the energy that we need for the youth today. Yeah, this is a very core foundation of what we will talk about when we talk about democracy, people's participation, and how we make it not just inclusive but meaningful, as in they also are involved in the implementation, in the decision-making process. And it always pops up on the question, if we already have a democratic if we already have the institutions there, the institutions of the legislative, executive, judiciary, it doesn't translate to democratic conduct yet. And there are lots of homeworks to do in it. So yes, thank you for making that comment, Jasmine. Now let's move on to Kinga from Poland, and then I'll call Errol later on. Okay, Kinga, you may have your floor.
Okay, hello everyone. So democracy is the system of principles and concepts created based on the philosophy of ancient Greece. As such, in different cultural areas, it may be understood, interpreted, and applied in a way different from the European way. Europe, thanks to Plato and Aristotle, focuses on the individual, personal freedom and individuality, and Asia, especially China, thanks to Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism, focuses on the harmony, achieving consensus, and subordinating the goals of the individual to the community. European thinks linearly, while Asian thinks holistically. And for example, it's well described by Richard Nibbett in his book Geography of the Thought. Those differences reflect on mutual understanding of each other's systems. For example, in the West, the concept of local societies is not as developed, in my opinion. And setting aside the differences to understanding of democracy, I perceive the disinformation as the biggest challenge to democracies nowadays, both among the youth and among the older generations. Disinformation is not a new phenomenon, but in the era of the internet and social media, it has developed enormously, and in my opinion, very much changed its meaning. The amount of fake news that each of us encounters daily is higher than ever, and everyone can see things that are posted on the internet, but respectively, everyone can post almost whatever they want. With the recent development of the AI, that disinformation is stronger than ever. According to the data that I found, for example, to a recent study conducted by the European Commission, 71% of Europeans encounter fake news online several times a month. 30% come across news or information they believe misinterprets the reality every day or almost every day, and 63% of younger Europeans come across fake news more than once a week. Currently, access to information is definitely easier and faster than it ever was. And while it's a great benefit, it poses many challenges, especially to the older generations that I would say are not as fluent as the younger ones and are still getting used to constantly developing new world of social media and the internet. While many of our grandparents have social media and use internet, a lot of them find it challenging to figure out which information is false and which is true. The era of newspaper democracy is slowly ending, while the era of social media democracy has begun and is constantly developing. While in newspapers, the information is more or less filtered and checked, there is someone that has to approve the information that is being shared with the public. There is basically no such thing in the internet, and it is impossible to implement the fact checking in the internet, as there are millions of information being shared every minute. The problem doesn't only touch the older generation. Don't get me wrong. The youth very often gets manipulated by the fake news as well, very easily. It is not hard to get lost in the amount of information that is being shared and that we see. And with the recent progress of the AI development, it is even harder to distinguish what is true and what is not. Nowadays, speeches of leaders, of authorities, of famous politicians, and well, basically every single person can be made up from scratch and can be auto-generated, making it very hard to distinguish between what is real and what is not, especially for the people who are not aware how everything works. Fake news is used daily to manipulate the public opinion. It happens with the ongoing issues. For example, in Poland, we had a very big problem with false information about the refugees on the Polish-Belarusian border. We had a massive income of fake news regarding the Russian invasion on Ukraine and the refugee situation here. And now we are facing another wave of false information regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict from both sides. Also, there's always huge amounts of disinformation before every election, every important event that's happening in the country. This disinformation is designed to shape the public opinion in certain ways. And while most people are not able to distinguish what is fake and what is not, it is extremely, extremely hard. It definitely has a huge impact on democracy. All people around the world, they rely on the things that they read and that they hear and base their decisions, also the political decisions, on the knowledge that they get. To sum up, I think that the international community should focus on the cybersecurity regulations because the technologies are developing every single day, and there is a huge room for improvement in this sphere as we still don't have enough policies, protection, and education among the citizens in this field. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kinga. I think the issue on social media, misinformation and hoax, we can really revisit that later to discuss more, because I think everybody has this interest to discuss about that, and there are a lot more in it that we can talk about. For instance, Indonesia, we are how many? 300 million people in our population, widespread in all over the islands and provinces, and they all have different digital literacy, different political literacy as well. Sometimes that's interconnected, a lot of multi-layers issue, and the solution that we can think about is education, or what policies from governments, and what about from the education end. We can discuss further about that, what Poland has done in making effort to improve the state of digital literacy of the people. Now I would like to invite Errol first. You are a Turkish, growing up in Poland. You'll definitely bring us a fresh perspective here, coming from two countries' perspective. So, Errol.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to Warsaw and good afternoon to Jakarta. Again, I'm Errol Çelik from Collegium Civitas, and today I would like to talk about authoritarian threats and also kindly invite you to discussion about it as a challenge to democracy. Actually, it's perfectly theoretically correct, but somewhat it is the basis of political science, actually. Establish a different regime rather than a democracy, for sure a challenge to democracy. because authoritarians or totalitarians don't desire to share the power or don't care about the pluralistic democratic ideas. But please put away for now this theoretic part, because there is much more deeper analytic case studies and data. Before give these examples and the case studies, I would like to share with you some data about how our global democracy going fall down really fast. According to Freedom Report 2023, which published by Freedom House, 38% of world population live in non-free countries. Only 20% of them live in free countries. But the majority group live in, such as Indonesia, live in semi-free countries. What does it mean? Can we define it as full democracy or freedom? I think no. But how it is happening? I have got some case studies. I think the first one is China. According to Reporters Without Borders Media Freedom Report, China defined as the biggest prison for journalists. It is ranked 175th among 179 countries. It is almost the latest one. All mainstream media channels monopolized by authoritarian regime. Chinese Communist Party started their political journey with one China policy, but today it is ongoing one party state policy. How Chinese people build a democratic system in this condition? Okay, let's use the internet. No, forget about it. Mostly, of course, there's some excuses always, but mostly Chinese people access to internet with their ID, making a criticism to authoritarian regime considered as crime. Okay, take a look to other examples from Turkey, from my country. All state facilities under monopolized authoritarian regime, which ruler more than 22 years. According to Turkish Radio Television Supreme Court, in this year, in April, the election time, main television channel, official television channel of Turkey gave 59 hours screen time to ruler coalition, but only 42 minutes. I am not saying hours, only 42 minutes the opposition coalition. Or maybe Russia, if we are talking about authoritarian threats, it is necessary to talk about Russia as a challenge to democracy, also a challenge to international security. Of course, it is important to be sensitive while talking about Russia's Ukraine war due to our lost lives. Also, it is important to open a different point of view to build democracy again and find a solution to this security issue. Most of the, especially young generation of Russia, enough with this authoritarian regime. They don't want to live this closed box anymore. How these people can build democracy again? Or North Korea, totalitarianism or maybe something more. Or the Sudan case, conflicts between Burhan and Bashir. Or Afghanistan, Taliban, the most extremist one maybe, which no longer defined as a terrorist organization according to latest global terrorism index. So what is the solution to build our global democracy again? I think in 2020, Belarusian people show one of the way with their protest against Lukashenko. I'm not able to say this is the exact solution, so I kindly invite everyone to discussion. This from all for now from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Errol. You know, Indonesia, we had a long history, a journey of democracy. We had that one time when freedom of speech was bad and human rights was bad. We're not saying that today it's all good, but there is always a tendency and a threat to democracy. And it's true when people say that the youth is the heir of the nation, of the democracy. And as long as we guard it and really find a way to monitor and keep it in check, I think that's if that doesn't happen, then any country can turn into the other side. So yeah, I would like to now revisit back the topic on digital, how to make democracy work in the digital age, before I move on to some other speakers. And I'd like to open the floor here. On you can give your thoughts or solutions that you could think of when it comes to digital literacy of the people facing hoax, misinformation, disinformation, not to mention how it is very easy to manipulate or getting people's votes with sort of false informations, for instance. And I think if any of the Polish students here could also share the legislation that I think was just passed in the EU on Digital Digital Service Act, that would also be great. We would like to learn more about that, because in Indonesia so far on misinformation and disinformation, I think it's a whole lot process behind that we haven't really seen much on the progress yet. So yeah, anyone, it doesn't have to be the main discussants. It could be from our participants as well. You may drop your comments or questions from the chat box. Kalista?
Sorry, are speakers allowed to discuss too?
Yes, of course, do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I would like to once again thank you for my fellow speakers, Jasmine, Errol, and Kinga. You guys delivered such beautiful speeches, such beautiful acknowledgements of the democratic world nowadays. I would like to actually agree on all of your informations actually. So because since we share the same main topic, which is the democratic world in this era right now, in our world right now, and yeah, I feel like it's really dangerous where we spread really, really bad hoax or misinformations that could actually lead to dangerous other problems outside of the main topic. So a lot of people actually mentions about the elections, which already happened in Poland, and also the elections that are happening in Indonesia right now. So with the process of having these informations that are gathered, and some of them are true, some of them are false, which actually shows how much people either care or do not care in this problem and critic. So and then after that, we would like to share that maybe in Indonesia's perspective, actually people do not care as much as like within the country, because we share they're sharing and understanding other people too. So I feel Jasmine, Errol, and Kinga for their opinions on if people have the option to actually share about hoax or misinformation and sharing them in the wrong way. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalista. It's also our main role as the youth, actually, to spread the awareness on misinformation, and it really is a technology, and social media is the closest to us, to our generation. So yeah. Now I'd like to bring one thing as the topic of discussion today. We know how important it is to have a civic education. It relates to how the people build their political literacy. In Indonesia, for instance, we have the case, a trend, we would say, where we vote. It might not be based on the ideas or the policies that the leaders are promoting, for instance, and it's mostly based on the names, on the figures, on who are they, and could be the people vote based on who they admire the most, as in like a fandom trend. Say it's a figure-based votes, for instance, that happens. Especially the trend is most obvious in the rural areas, the local areas. Maybe in urban areas, that's not necessarily the case. We still see things critically based on the policies. What are the ideas that they're proposing, for instance? but there are lots of cases where people based on figures, and not to mention later we can bring up about money, sort of money politics as well. But is it the same case going on in Poland? Do people there, especially the youth, really vote based on the things that they are campaigning, the ideas, the policies? And I know EU is one of the issues of consideration for people to vote there. So maybe somebody from Poland. I'd like to open the floor. Maybe Gabriel, you haven't spoken. Yeah.
Because you mentioned about the money politics. I know that we're about to discuss this later, but it came to my mind about the money politics with, for example, the Law and Justice party, which, for example, to gain votes would basically tell people that it's going to give out money. So that's one of the thoughts that came to my mind if it comes to money politics, because there's a whole thing when peace was still ruling, because we know that it's most probably that the opposition is going to rule now, that when Law and Justice was ruling, they would hand out something called 500 plus, which translates to 500 zlotych for every child that is born. So I guess that, I mean, that's not for the youth specifically. I would say that it was more for the older generations. I guess that for the younger generations, the most important thing was breaking basically the law by Law and Justice, which is kind of ironic how the party is called Law and Justice, but they breaking the law by, for example, taking away abortion rights. So that's my take on it.
Thank you, Gabriel, for your insight. If you want to extend, I know you got a speaking time after this. If you want to also, if you want to say something else before we invite some other people.
No, not right now, but later when my turn is, I will explain more about the voting process actually. So yeah, that's all that I have to say right now.
That's great. Just a little comment before actually your turn. Sort of this how the Polish youth, you mentioned that you really vote based on issues that are close to the youth life. For instance, you mentioned abortion. Perhaps in Indonesia, when there came a time where we held a big protest when it was about the legislation on sexual violence back then, and it really triggers a big amount of youth gathering, protesting, and then those issues, and then on ITE law technology, it also triggers a lot of youth to rise up and protest. And when it comes to other things, sometimes it's less on the youth in front of the building protesting. So it's interesting to see the trend, how youth are very sensitive to certain issues, and that also proves that we do care, just especially for the issues that are close to our heart. Kinga, you want to say something before Gabriel has her speaking time?
Yeah, you just asked a second ago about the regulations that we have in Poland. In 2022, there was the DSA Act, and there was a recent meeting about it also in the European Union. Well, basically, the DSA Act here kind of tries to fight with the disinformation. But the big companies like Facebook or Twitter, they're very much against it because it kind of complicates things for them. Elon Musk, for example, said that, like, if I'm not mistaken, that he's thinking to kind of move away a little bit from Europe if the regulations go forward. we also in Poland right now, there are propositions that are appearing in the our criminal law for the putting like fake news and false information out there in the internet, although we all know how hard it is to track who actually posted and started a fake news. And right now, Poland is mostly fighting with a mass disinformation coming from Russia and from Belarus that is kind of trying to destabilize the situation in our country. And just to maybe add a little bit to my previous speech, I think that the most important thing right now is to educate the public and everyone, both young kids at school and maybe older people who are not as fluent in the world of social media, about how to distinguish what is false and what is correct, and what is right and what is wrong. Because as us young people, it's a little bit easier for us to do like our own fact checking, but for example, our grandparents, for example, I don't know how it is in Indonesia, but in Poland, more and more grandparents have Facebook, they have social media, and very often we hear stories how the grandparents are believing in the news that they see, for example, on Facebook, or they find some, shady websites that are sharing news, and they just believe whatever they read because they're used to the newspapers, where they have, when in newspapers everything is checked. There are people who pass the information, who approve the information that is being posted. And they're not used to the fact that in social media, everyone can post and publish whatever they want. So yeah, I really think that the education of the people is something to go forward with, and it's something crucial in this age. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know if my other Indonesian students, colleagues would agree on me with this, but I think our civic education should really start considering, if not in the civic education, then probably another subject of the study. We should really start the digital literacy subject being discussed more. And yeah, that's something that we haven't really seen progressing as fast as the advancement of the technology itself, at least in our country. And you mentioned, thank you for commenting on the Digital Services Act. So it hasn't been passed yet in the EU.
Basically it has, but in 2022, but it's still being kind of developed and implemented in the European countries.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the information.
Ongoing issue. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the information. So for those who are not updated about it, the EU has this legislation called Digital Service Act. It has to do with content moderation, how to fight against misinformation and disinformation. You can take a look at this topic later. Now I'd like to move on to something that is very timely and interesting. We're going to talk about the voting process. I believe Gabriel will talk about that, how it is in Poland. And I know later Georges from Indonesia and Shah will also touch upon something very close to voting process and the democratic conduct in Indonesia. So Indonesia is having our election in February next year, so it's very important. And Poland just finished voting, so let's see what they got to speak. Gabriel?
Thank you very much. So first of all, I would just like to start and point out that the previous speakers have already said a lot about the essence of democracy and to its existence. As it was said, I think, in my opinion, the democracy is the best of the existing political systems. However, it is threatened by crises and even danger of collapse. In my opinion, the most serious threats include, first and foremost, dictatorship of the majority, which I will expand on later on, intolerance, power pathology, anarchy, imposed democracy, totalitarian tendencies, the economic and international situation, and most significantly, social passivity, which I will also elaborate on later. A serious problem is to determine to what extent the majority is actually right and on what issues. It should not be appealed to because history knows many examples of mistaken majority opinions. We have, for example, the Nazi Germany with only a tiny fraction of the population that opposed of the extermination of the Jewish population. In South Africa, for example, we have the Black majority, which retaliates against the white minority, the 4 years of apartheid. And in Turkey, the majority denies rights to the Kurdish minority, which maybe my colleague would like to elaborate on that later on in our conversation. It is questionable to recognize the decisions on the majority in matters of vital importance. A large part of the Polish public is in favor of reinstating, for example, the death penalty. However, it would be a violation of one of the most important values, which is human life. The democratic system has developed mechanisms to guard against the threat of majority dictatorships, and that includes, first and foremost, constitutionally guaranteed rights of minorities, as well as an electoral law that ensures them an adequate number of seats in representative bodies. An important role is also played by the complex legislative process, which practically precludes the enactment of laws that violate the interests of minorities. In Poland, such a function is performed by the Constitutional Court, which adjudicates the compatibility of legal acts with the basic law. And important safeguard is the introduction of restrictions on the possibility of amending the constitution. And also a barrier to dictatorship of the majority are international conventions and agreements on the protection of human rights signed and ratified by the state, as well as bilateral agreements with neighboring countries on the rights of national minorities. On the other hand, democracy is a system that is designed to serve the people. First and foremost, the sovereignty of the people that is entrusting them with power is one of the fundamental principles of democracy. Lack of public trust for those in power usually leads to exclusion of society from public life. This translates into low voter turnout. As a result, there's doubt about the extent to which the majority is actually the expression of the will of the majority of society. With a voter turnout below 50%, the most common for election in Poland, any parliamentary majority that emerges will represent a minority of citizens. So just like a few days ago, there were parliamentary elections held in Poland, and the turnout broke out the record even of the 1989 when Poland had its first free election since World War II. And this showed how important is the participation in election is. Another serious threat to existence of democratic state is failure to adhere to democratic principles enshrined in the Constitution. One of the most important is the principle of sovereignty of the people, according to which power is in the state is exercised by the people directly or through their democratically elected representatives. Falsifying voting results or candidate support lists, using lies and slander in election campaign distort this principle and are a threat to democracy. And for the maintenance of democratic principles of public life, pluralism, whether political, social, economic, plays an important role. Delegalizing opposition parties and associations inconvenient to those in power makes it difficult to play a fair political game. And that would be my statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. I'd like to invite Borges from FBCI chapter Binus University.
Thank you, moderator. Good morning to my friends in Poland and good evening to my friends in Jakarta. My name is Georges Bryan, and I am currently representing the FPCI chapter Venus University in discussing a topic regarding democratic governance. Before starting my presentation, I would like to thank the previous delegates for the awesome presentations. Democracy is a system that relies on the will of the society. The democratic system emphasizes freedom to every citizen and provides rights and opportunity for the public to participate directly or indirectly in public policy decision making. Public participation in the political system that ultimately leads to competitiveness and competition for power or decision making. However, democracy in practice is often faced with various challenges, and from the observation of FPCI chapter Venus University, we have identified 7 points that are related to the challenges in Indonesia. First is the institution building in Indonesia. Since the start of Indonesia's democratic process, one of the most notable and visible achievements of the government of Indonesia have been the formation of numerous democratic institutions. You can name it like the Corruption Eradication Committee, and or the Komnas HAM, which stands for the Committee for Human Rights in Indonesia. Furthermore, local non-government organizations have also been empowered and encouraged by the government to be proactive at local politics. Unfortunately, the formation and empowerment of these democratic institutions are still deemed not enough. A decade after their formation, the progress made by these commissions are either regarded lacking or even regressing as a result of creeping authoritarianism. Second is accountability. Democratic governance in Indonesia is centered on fostering greater connections between the government and public in order to develop a government that is clean, effective, democratic, and dependable. The country has legislation on access to information, national development planning, and anti corruption, among other measures that support open government. The values of a transparent, responsible, and participatory government are enshrined in the Constitution. However, there are worries that elected officials in Indonesia are leveraging the will of the people to undermine democratic accountability mechanisms. Despite that, Indonesia has highlighted government transparency as a measure for achieving its aims of improving access and quality of public services. The UNDP collaborates with numerous government agencies to enhance our democratic governance, accountability, and responsiveness. Citizens' power to demand accountability and more accessible government is critical to good governance, and there is growing understanding of the need for innovative approaches to how donors support accountability. The third is corruption. Corruption is a very serious issue in Indonesia, and despite the country's efforts to combat it, it remains a pervasive at both national and subnational levels. The Corruption Eradication Commission was established in 2003 to prevent and fight corruption in the country, and it has engaged in significant work revealing and prosecuting cases of corruption in crucial government bodies. However, corruption remains a challenge to be addressed, particularly at the subnational level, where public spending on education is highly corrupt in highly corrupt regions has a negligible effect on education outcomes. The issue of corruption is particularly relevant in the education sector, where public and private schools funded by the state fund are held accountable by complying with Law of Republic Indonesia number 25 year 2009 on public services. Corruption puts a negative impact on economic growth, the level of GDP per capita, investment, international trade, and price stability. The second point and the fourth point is money politics. Money politics is the most common practice practiced by individuals and political parties in various countries to increase electability. In simple terms, the concept of money politics is providing money or goods to someone in exchange for their abstaining from voting or vote specific candidates. The factor that causes someone want to accept money politics is because, quote unquote, because we do not know the depth of all the candidates who participate in the election. The practice of money politics showed that the principle of democracy are not running properly and has shown the moral decay of politicians and the recipient community. As a solution, the supremacy and optimization of law enforcement agencies is one of the concrete efforts that can be made to minimize money politics. The fifth problem is civil military relations. Despite extensive reforms of the military participation in our government in early 2000s, The reforms have since stalled and failed to ensure a full civilian control. Hona, in her 2013 journal, argued that the incomplete reform is the result of a bargain between the civilian officials in the military, in which the military agreed to refrain from participating in politics under the conditions that civilian officials would respect the military's institutional autonomy and overlook its lack of accountability. Unfortunately, the incomplete reforms and overlooking the military's lack of accountability also presents a risk to Indonesia's young democracy. The sixth problem is identity politics. Identity politics is described as a series of political activities that aim to elevate and emphasize the identity of individual or group with the aim of achieving political goals. Indonesia is a democratic country and has a very multicultural civil society. This condition makes the practice of identity politics develop rapidly and diversely. While the objective of the identity politics is, of course, to build a good image of the public's perception and mobilize voter support for political parties and candidates, in practice, identity politics will have an impact on creating an unhealthy political climate and competition. Because the obsession of an individual or political parties eventually leads to social and political conflicts, such as acts of extremism, discrimination, oppression, fanatical supporters, political tribalism, and labeling. The seventh problem is political concentration. We also believe the formation of gigantic government coalitions is quite detrimental to the development of Indonesia's democracy, as it eliminates considerable opposition to the ruling government, hence limits any activities of check and balances and creates opportunity to pass controversial policies. Furthermore, the political concentration in Indonesia also presents an obstacle towards the country's effort to combat corruption and create policies that will only benefit certain powerful groups. Uh, in in conclusion, from the discussion above, we believe that Indonesia needs to overcome a lot of challenges in avoiding a further regression of democracy. Despite the prevalence of issues such as identity politics and then the political concentration, lack of accountability, we we believe that the civil society role in Indonesia is still quite strong, even according to several scholars actually. Therefore, we believe the empowerment of our society is crucial to stop use this opportunity to urge all of our counterparts, both in Indonesia and in Poland, to never give up and always try to raise awareness and try to keep up with the latest political events in our country. That way, we can ensure that democratic values remain upheld and ensure a better country for our generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Gorgeous. I think I was supposed to put you as a closing remark because that sums up everything that we have in our country. But yeah, there are a lot of interesting points we would like to discuss further. Got some notes here. So before we have the discussion flowing, last but not least to speak, we have Shah. Shah is from, FPCI chapter Universitas Erlangga.
Okay, am I audible?
You are.
Okay, so I think I'm going to start with a baseline context, and I think we can all agree that democracy as a system is inherently participatory. Public participation is an inherent part of democracy. That's obvious. Well, we can all agree on that. But hypothetically speaking, what if all conventional political outlets, all the political parties and organizations out there are exclusive to themselves and very, very unaccommodating to the youth, to the new people in the political scene and their more progressive contemporary ideas and notions? That is not a hypothesis. That is unfortunately what is currently going on in Indonesia pretty much. Well, as we all know, and as a context too, Indonesia is a multi-party democratic state. That's a fact. But with one big giant single caveat. According to the Political Party Act of 2011, each and every single one of those parties must adhere to one, like exactly one singular ideology, that is Pancasila. And for all the Indonesians watching, don't get me wrong, there is nothing inherently wrong with that. Pancasila is a uniting force after all, but if single ideology with multi-parties taken to the extreme, all those parties could transform themselves into one giant monolithic interest group with no real actual tangible idea, relying on what my friend has previously said, solely on the whim of the elites and political figures to serve their own interests. It finally brings me to my next point, something that Indonesia has experienced back in 2016 in relation to the 2019 election back then. Indonesia has seen a sharp, like very sudden increase in populist movement, pushed forward by various political elites and their own agenda and their own hatred agenda. The motto of Indonesia, which is unity in diversity, has suddenly kind of broken down, replaced by a lot of hatred and sentiment between people, especially towards religious minority, ethnic minority, gender minorities, political minorities, etc., etc., etc. And as I've said before, it hit its peak in 2019 election. But even until now, the unprecedented polarization and sentiment is still felt all around the country. Especially, we have yet another election next year. And because of that, because of the political elites and the polarization and the populist movement, and how they are gatekeeping political system and political parties in Indonesia, the youth, the folks, the people on the grassroots have seen many difficulties in entering the political scene that is, to be frank, dominated by the same people and their cronies. Well, and the choices between conforming with their ideas, well, being pretty much the same political parties as anyone else, or facing various rejection, be it systemic, such as getting kicked out because of the political threshold or not, repression and persecution and whatever else. But it might sound pretty grim, but I'd say that not all hope is lost, especially because we are talking about the youth and their movement. If we are talking about Indonesia, recently I've seen various group of youth, various aspects of civil society all throughout the country that is trying to voice their ideas through method outside of the systematically broken political scene. I mean, we can all observe on our daily life, especially for those who use social media a lot, those who are chronically online on, I don't know, Twitter or Instagram. You can all see a lot of people, Indonesian, the youth, is talking about politics, is like complaining to the government about this and about that and about whatever else happening all around the country. Things as simple as that proves that the youth wants to participate in politics, but we are gatekept from it. And it ranged from that to a more bigger, more impactful act, such as the nationwide protest that we have seen back then, Indonesia have seen back then in 2019 and 2020 regarding Omnibus Law, corruption eradication, and sexual violence act, and other kind of problematic law that has been enacted by the government. And there is a precedent for the youth in politics. There is a precedent for the youth to act directly, take direct action in politics outside of the political scene. We could all gather our voices, our concern, our movement, all of us to finally, quote unquote, break the system down and rebuild it to fix it more for the better. Maybe if we all could just replace the political elites and their obsolete ideas with a more progressive ideas that is upheld by the youth, maybe we could make a more progressive and sustainable Indonesia and a more progressive and sustainable world. Maybe and just maybe. I think that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chef, for the insightful comment. Well, I want to bring up one notion here when we talk about the democracy. Everybody keep on saying democracy really is about serving the will of the people and the interest of the public, the interest of the people. And at least in Indonesia, we have a discussion on the people that represent us. Are they the capable ones, and are they actually selected based on the people's choice? In this case, we're talking about the merit-based political party system, as political parties are about representing the people. And a lot of discussion, a lot of debates here. We have seen money politics taking over, the value and the meaning of democracy itself. And sometimes this undemocratic conduct leads to what we say and what we have been talking about, that is corruption or bad laws, or again, rule of law being taken over as a rule by law of man. In Indonesia, we have that case, and it goes back to how we choose our leaders, how we choose our people's representatives. A lot of criticisms, a lot of comments on whether we should have some kind of reform. where it talks about political party finance as well. And I'd like to get some insights from Poland, from Polish students here. Is that also an issue in Poland? How does your political party work? Are they representing really the will of the people? You guys have issue in that, or where are they finance coming from? Are they from your tax, or you could give some enlightenment on that. Maybe Gabriel, Errol, or Kinga, you can comment on this. Errol?
Sure, thank you so much for my turn. I would like to make a point to all my colleagues talk about the polarization of politics and identity. I think it is one of the most important challenge to democracy, as everybody said. Polarization in different countries can show itself by ethnic diversity, or show itself by as Shia Mohammed said, the identity. You can define another ethnic group, such as Gabriel mentioned in Turkey, the others, the terrorist Kurdish people, or you can, politics can divide the society with blame the other party as a being communist, or the hard capital, or another thing. I think it is the main point. Polarized politics, identity politics, divide the big group is a very serious challenge to democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Errol. Kinga?
Yeah, so you also asked about if in Poland the people's opinion reflect how the leaders are chosen, right? If I understood correctly. Yes, so basically in Poland we we had a very big problem with the people actually going to vote. So a lot of young people were deciding to not to vote, for example, and that's why the voice of the younger people was not really heard, and didn't really reflect in the elections. In the latest election that happened just last month, the frequency was like a record number. We had, I believe, 78, if I'm not mistaken, % of the Polish people voting. So that's a very great step. I think the young people got really mad with how it looks like right now, how the situation is in the country, and they actually decided to vote. Here in Warsaw, for example, people were my friends. I was lucky to be voting in a place where there was not a big queue, but my friends, for example, they were standing for 6 hours to give their vote. So it was something amazing this year. But before, the problem was that we have a very strong supporters of the Law and Justice Party, and they're very eager to vote. While the people who support the opposition, they do support it, but very often they were not actually going to place their vote. And this was a very big problem, because a lot of the people in the country were dissatisfied with how the elections turned out. But on the other hand, they were not going actually to give their vote and express their opinion. So this was a very big problem in Poland that hopefully the trends are looking that it's going to hopefully change. I really hope in that, actually. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kinga. I'd like to invite Gabriel to chime in here. And if you could also share a little bit of insight on the people that sit there in the Senate, and also the lower house as well, the upper house. Are they actually representing the people's interest, or there are lots of also the same case in Indonesia, for instance? It's so much cases on money politics, and the people that end up sitting there might not be necessarily the people that fight for what's good for the whole, the majority of the people. It could be something that of their personal or certain parties' interest. For instance, this trend that we're seeing that is a threat to democracy. Gabriel?
Well, just as I said previously, I don't personally think that with Law and Justice, they were actually represent. What I want to say that they didn't represent the younger generation. In my opinion, because most of the people that were voting for Law and Justice are the older generation. Not everybody, but the older generation in general. As I said previously, I think that mostly was because they're more conservative, as of Law and Justice is on the right side, being more conservative. So with them saying that we want sovereignty for Poland, that all the issues with the European Union, where they don't necessarily want everything that European Union wants. And I think that speaks to most of the older generation. As I said, even previously with the abortion law, I think that was the tip over for the younger generation, because it is, especially for women, our future. And I think that was the tip over for why we protested so much. I mean, we saw on the news how many people were there, men, women, children even, were going to protest about that. So I would definitely say that at the time, they were not necessarily speaking for the people, but for themselves and what they believe in specifically. And well, I would also want to say about the what Kinga said previously about the voting, how people did not the younger generation didn't want to vote for the past 8 years. I think I heard somewhere that the whole dynamic was that, well, the opposition's not going to win anyways, since I know that most of my friends wanted to vote for Lewica, which is the leftist party. And since they did not have a lot of seats in Sejm, it was very hard for them to get anything done or legislated. So I think the dynamic was like, well, they're not going to win anyway, so why bother? But again, as I said, the tip over was probably all the breaking points that Law and Justice did that made the younger generation want to change something in Poland. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. You want to add something, Kinga? If you could make it also
Yeah,
quick,
just
so we
quickly
can accommodate Indonesia.
Yeah, quickly, the problem in Poland is also the very big division in the society, in the case that we have people from smaller cities and villages that have most of them, for example, they do not go to university, they focus on other type of jobs. And on the other hand, they have a lot of children. And when, for example, Law and Justice promised money for each child, so the program that Gabi mentioned, the 500 plus, it was 500 zloty that was given monthly per each child. So, for example, if you have 4 children, you get 2,000 zloty monthly. And they kept on promising on increasing this amount of money, and that's why the people that are living in those smaller cities, these smaller communities, they're also more eager to actually go and vote to make sure that the people that promise them such things are actually in power and can actually enforce such promises. And the younger generation, as Gabi mentioned, they didn't really see the chances of the opposition actually coming in power. Coming to power, so that was a very big problem. That it was this it was just a part of our society that was actually willing to fight for what they want. And since they have different type of jobs, for example, they're not also as impacted by the taxes that we're paying, because all the money that goes for this, it comes from our taxes. And right now in Poland, we have very big problem with inflation and with the prices going up. A lot of people, especially young people that are working, they have problems with being able to afford apartments because the prices are like really, really very high going up. The prices for the electricity, water bills, they are climbing up, and prices in the stores for even food. We have a very big problem with that right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you to our Polish colleagues. Thank you, Kinga. Now, I'd like to invite Kalista, Shah, and Georges here. But with the closing question, since we're limited by a time constraint and we're about to wrap up soon, the most important question to end this session, the youth and democracy. An important question that I'd like to get each of you to answer is whether you see there is a declining appetite of democracy in the youth, or are you optimistic of the energy that we have, the spaces and the capability that we have as the youth to refuel sort of the air and to keep the nation on track to have a future of a better democracy. And as I said in the beginning, that there might be an intergenerational gap in learning and understanding about democracy. We don't have any memories of the past. In the new order, our Polish colleagues, is the era where we had the very bad freedom of speech and military rules and everything. We don't have that memories in our mind. We didn't experience that. We don't have any traumatic experience, but because of that, there might be an intergenerational gap in learning how valuable and how important it is to protect our democracy. But I'd like to invite first from Kalista and then from Georges and then Shah, and your thoughts about us and democracy. Kalista?
All right, thank you. So thank you so much, Kak Jenny. So I would like to first pop out the main question and the main statement from the previous team, which is from the Poland students. So I would like to actually point out on the elections as well, because as a democracy focused world right now, and since Indonesia in the upcoming February, we're going to have like in Bahasa Coblos, or we vote for our future leaders. So at this point, again, they promise us a lot of things. All three of the ones who are wanting to get voted are promising a lot of things, and us as youth, we start to think critically, like, are they really going to do it? Are they really going to promise that much to their people? So I would actually like to share a lot of as Kak Jenny said, like the traumatic things that older generation experienced, like for example the 1998 riot. Like that's like one of the biggest problems in Indonesia, where people are being discriminated, people are being treated really badly, and that's like one of the most downfalls Indonesia has. But I feel like through that traumatic experience that for like our parents experience or other people experience, I feel like that's one of the most valuable examples for us to be more open, more understanding to other people, because being open and being open-minded shows that we do care about ourselves and other people. Because being caring is not only a cliche, but it's also one of the most powerful thing to actually comprehend, because being able to understand and being open to other people, and through the democratic and modern world, or like social media, newspapers are not often distributed anymore. We can just open it through our phone. I feel like that's an easy access for us to understand what is going on in Indonesia as well as outside of Indonesia. Not taking the example of combining and understanding the same thing, but we're also trying to comprehend which and what we're focusing on as a whole, as a youth in Indonesia. Because as youth in Indonesia, we are focused, we are taught to actually make Indonesia better. We are doing education, we're going to universities, we're going to school, just to be better people, just to be an open mind, able to openly share our opinions, our messages, for example. I feel like that is a way to show that Indonesia's youth are brave enough and is willing to help Indonesia to become a better country and to become politically open-minded and wise in the whole. I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalista. That's a good note. Now off to Georges and then Shah. Please keep it short as we're running out of time.
Thank you, Jenny. I would like to first thank Kalista for the amazing points. Regarding Jenny's question, I personally believe from my observation that the participation of youth, especially in politics, is really high. I mean, probably like Kalista mentioned, either because many young Indonesians are now enrolling to higher education system. There are a lot of Indonesians who enroll in university compared to our parents' generation or even our grandparents. So that's a good thing, which also explains why the awareness of democracy in young Indonesians are increasing. Another thing that I believe contributes to the increase of democratic exposure for Indonesians, I believe, is the globalization phenomenon. Indonesians see other countries who have democratized earlier, like the Europes and the Americas, and we see that, oh, democracy is a very good thing. Like, we want to try and emulate the system here in Indonesia. We see what's the good aspects in Europe, in US, and we want to try to emulate the same thing here in Indonesia. So I believe that's actually one of the positive contributions of globalization to our society, which have helped to increase our political awareness. Actually, I followed one Instagram account that is What Is Up Indonesia. It's a very active political social media account that raise awareness of political issues in Indonesia. And actually, it has quite a great following, like 171,000 people. It's very a lot. Not to mention that every time there's a political development, usually you can see the trends in the Twitter, and usually it's dominated by accounts that are coming from young generations. So I believe that while there's probably a lack of younger representation in our political system, but that doesn't mean that the younger generation are become more apathetic to our politics. Instead, it's the opposite. We're paying more attention to our politics, and with more frequent rallies, more demonstrations, we believe that young Indonesians have a power to influence the politics in Indonesia. Probably that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Gorgeous. That was one thing to add just a little bit, not to forget, if we learn from other countries to apply in our country. Indonesia is also actually a country that other countries are learning from based on our process and journey. That's a very rare thing to see, how we develop into a democracy when we had that such tough past. Some other countries are still struggling with that, and we do not and must not take it for granted, I'd say. So yeah, to close the session.
Okay, so I might actually continue from Kalista's and Gorgis' point, and also it is kind of related with what Kinga and Gabriel talked before about election in Poland. But if you go to Indonesian election website right now and check every single one political parties there, they are all literally the same. No, I mean not literally, but practically the same. They are all, well, based on Pancasila. They are all in support of blah blah blah, etc., 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 etc. Everything is generic. Wait, we only have 4 months until our next election in Indonesia. And I honestly don't know who to choose at this point because everyone is practically the same. That's one thing that I see as a problem in Indonesian politics. And what I'd like to say is, maybe we can. Well, I think Gergus and Kalista have said about this before, but the youth is actually pretty active, politically speaking, especially on the internet, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, but a bit rare. Well, maybe we should take, quote unquote, take matters into our own hands and get more involved in, I would not say conventional, but a more, the regular, usual through political parties and other global civil society movement to involve us more in politics. Because, well, maybe we need a new thing in our political scene in Indonesia. Because I'm honestly bored with whatever the older political parties are offering to us right now. Maybe that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that we all end this session with a good note. Remain optimistic, but be cautious and do not take democracy for granted. And thank you to our Polish colleagues for your insightful comments. And we learn as well from Poland. We have different kinds and different system, slightly different, but we really could learn from each other. And this conversation, this dialogues, this discussion really needs to continue, not only between Poland and Indonesia, but of course with other countries. And that's what FPCI will be doing ahead in the future to have more discussion about democracy and of course, especially the youth to take part in it. So I'll give back the floor to the Master of Ceremony, Herza. Thank you everyone for your participation.
Thank you, Jenny. And thank you to all of our speakers for the insightful conversation. Now, before we move on to closing this event today, I would like to invite everybody to turn on their camera to take a group picture together. Okay. Okay, we will take the group picture in 3, 2, 1. Okay, there are 2 slides, so we are going to take another one. One more. 3, 2, 1. Okay. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, today's event has come to an end. We would like to thank Dr. Katadzrina and students from Collegium Civitas and students from FPCI chapters Universitas Pelita Harapan, FPCI chapter Universitas Bina Nusantara, FPCI chapter London School of Public Relations, and FPCI chapter Universitas Erlangga. And we would like to thank all of the participants for joining us today in this discussion. Please give a big round of applause to all of our speakers and our moderator today. This event is available to be rewatched on our YouTube channel called Secretariat FPCI. Once again, thank you for joining today's public discussion, and we'll see you in our next event. Thank you.